Hare Krishna, Namaste.
Chapter 13 is entitled as Kshetra, Kshetrajña Yoga, also as Prakriti Purusha Vibhaga Yoga, also as Prakriti Purusha Viveka Yoga. Sloka 13, Part 4. Jñeyaṁ yattat pravakṣyāmi jñātvāmṛtam aśnute anādi mat-paraṁ brahma nāsad ucyate. I shall now explain the knowable, knowing which you will taste the eternal. Brahman, the spirit, beginningless and subordinate to me, lies beyond the cause and effect of this material world. We have learnt so far from this chapter the field of activities, the Prakriti and its various forms. We also learned how to know the field of activities as well as how to know the knower of the field of activities through those 20 qualities. Next, in this sloka, Krishna explains about the soul, the knower itself. The knower, which is the living entity, Jivatma, is anādi, which is beginningless. It has not come into being during the creation, and it is not destroyed during the destruction. It exists eternally. That Atma, Jivatma, is subordinate to the Supreme Lord, mat-paraṁ, because it is part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, and the Supreme Lord is the super soul within each of the living entities. Therefore, all the living entities are subordinate to the Supreme Lord. The living entities are servants to the Supreme Lord, and the Supreme Lord is the master for these living entities. It implies, without even being mentioned, that the Supreme Lord is also the controller, owner of non-living entities. The living entities are also referred as Brahman, Brahma, meaning an object that possesses the quality of largeness, big, huge, that is called Brahman. Many times in the Vedas we see that this term Brahman referred to Prakriti and then the Muktatma, also to Paramatma. The reason the same term Brahman is being used for all these different entities is because they possess the quality of largeness. Prakriti is called Brahman at times. Even in Bhagavad Gita we have learnt earlier, because it is limitless, it is large, it extends unlimitedly. Therefore, Prakriti is called Brahman. Likewise, the Atma, which is liberated, or called as Muktatma, are also called as Brahman because their consciousness, their knowledge also extend without any limit, any barrier. Paramatma obviously is called Brahman because he himself pervaded everywhere. Therefore, he is Brahman. Though this term Brahma is used for other entities as well, but primarily the meaning of this word is used for Paramatma, the Supreme Lord, and as a secondary meaning used for Prakriti and Muktatma. And the Muktatma, the liberated living entity, is being endowed with certain qualities of the Supreme Lord. That's another reason why the living entities are called or referred as Brahma. And this is what we have covered so far. We are at the last line of the sloka, nāsad ucyate, meaning the Atma is neither said to be Sat nor as Asat. There are different ways to see these two terms, but which are ultimately ends to same meaning. Asat means karana, which is cause. Sat means effect, karya. Sat also is a state of being, existing. Asat means state of non-being. In the state of pralaya, destruction period, it is called as Asat. And during the Srishti, creation period, it is called as Sat, state of Sat. Now, before we go any further, there are a few terms we need to understand so we don't get lost. Achetana and Chetana. Chetana means sentient, that which has knowledge, that which has consciousness, or called Chetana. Whereas Achetana is opposite of Chetana. Those elements or objects which are non-sentient, doesn't have knowledge, doesn't have that consciousness, and this consciousness knowledge is what we covered in the previous session. So those elements which has consciousness, knowledge, are called Chetana and also referred as sentient being, whereas absence of consciousness, knowledge are the elements known as non-sentient, referred as Achetana. In other words, all the material elements that comes from Prakriti included, are Achetana, non-sentient. Whereas the living entities, Atmas, are sentient being, Chetana, which means the living entity possesses knowledge, has consciousness, therefore they are Chetana. Whereas the material element does not have knowledge, does not possess consciousness, therefore they are non-sentient, they are referred as Achetana. They don't have the power of perception to perceive anything, to know anything. They don't have that consciousness. All those are present in the Chetana, the sentient being. With that understanding, now let's see three realities that exist. They are called Tattvatrayas, three realities. They are, number 1, Chetana, number 2, Achetana, number 3 is Ishvara. Chetana is a Sanskrit term for sentient being. Achetana is a term for non-sentient being, whereas Ishvara is the Supreme Lord, who is the controller of both Chetana and Achetana, the material element, which are non-sentient, and the living entity, which are sentient. All these three tattvas, realities, are eternal. They exist at the time of pralaya. When we say pralaya, the destruction, it is a period or a duration where creation does not happen. That duration is called pralaya. Likewise, when we say srishti, creation, that is a period when pralaya does not happen. So they are two different durations. Now, the three entities, Chetana, Achetana, Ishvara, the living entity, the material elements, and the Supreme Lord, they exist at the time of pralaya, meaning during the time frame of pralaya. They do exist, but not in the same condition as during the time of creation. The Prakriti, which is Achetana, non-sentient, gets a variety of forms and names such as Devatas, Manushya, Pakshi, etc. during the Srishti stage, creation. In the Pralaya stage, they do not have forms and names. That is called the destruction period, Pralaya stage. In the Pralaya stage, the Atmas are in its dormant stage. They have no bodies like Devata, Manushya, Pakshi, Tavara. They don't have any of these bodies, which means obviously they don't have any names. At the time of creation, depending on their karma, these Atmas get connected with a certain body like Devata, Manushya, Pakshi, Tavara, etc. And as they get their respective bodies, their consciousness expands, which was dormant in the Pralaya stage. In other words, the consciousness, the knowledge is coiled like a snake. And when the Jivatma takes the body, that coiled snake now releases itself to be in its natural position. And the degree of expansion of this knowledge, consciousness, is completely dependent on the individual karma of the Atmas. So we have learned about the sentient. We also learned about non-sentient. Now, the Supreme Lord, who has the transcendental body of both sentient and non-sentient entities in a subtle state during the Pralaya. That is, the non-sentient which has not evolved into Mahan, Ahankara, Pancha Jnanendriya, Pancha Karmendriya, Pancha Tanmatra, Pancha Bhuta, Manas, has not got into any of these variations yet in the Pralaya stage. Likewise, the sentient entities whose consciousness has not blossomed. So we are talking now about Ishvara during the Pralaya stage. We already saw the living entities in the Pralaya stage, their consciousness are not blossomed, and the non-sentient entities who doesn't have variation, who doesn't have any forms or names during the Pralaya stage. Likewise, during the Pralaya stage, Ishvara, the Supreme Lord, Ishvara, has the body of sentient and non-sentient entities in a subtle state. During the creation, the Lord manifests with the body of sentient and non-sentient entities in a gross stage. In other words, the sentient beings with expanded consciousness and the non-sentient involved into universes in the form of devatas, manushya, pakshi, tavara, etc. So this is the foundation understanding that we need to have to understand Sat and Asat. The state obtained in the creation stage does not exist during the pralaya stage. In the Tattvatraya, in the sentient, non-sentient and Ishvara. That stage is designated as Asat, meaning non-being state. And during the expansion that takes place in the period of creation, it is designated as Sat, meaning being state. Both these stages, Sat and Asat, for an individual Atma, living entities, are completely based on their respective karmas. Based on the karma, the consciousness either goes into dormant state during the pralaya or it goes into a blossom state during the Srishti, creation. If the Atma's consciousness, knowledge, is manifested to the fullest, which is to the maximum capacity, which is actually unlimited, how much it can extend, the knowledge can extend, and that stage is the stage of mukti, that does not exist during the pralaya stage or during the srishti stage. It is outside of these two things that happen. Because the living entity is attained mukti, liberated, they are not restricted within these two Sat and Asat. Meaning, the living entity comes into the pralaya stage or goes into creation stage, which are called as Sat when it comes into the gross stage, Asat when it goes into subtle state. Again, subtle state is where the consciousness are restricted. They are in its dormant stage. Whereas in the Sat stage, being stage, the consciousness, knowledge are manifested, expanded. But when the Jivatma attains liberation, there is neither Sat nor Asat. It will be in its natural position because it's free from karma. Because it's totally free from karma, neither Sat, because it will not take any bodies like devas, humans, animals, etc., nor Asat, its knowledge is dormant. In the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, it is said, Tad detam tarhi avyakritam asit tan nama rupabhyam vyakriyate. Sat and Asat happens. Being and non-being happens because of the karma. The muktatmas, the liberated entities, living entities, are free of karma. Therefore, Sat and Asat are not applied to them. Effect means Sat and cause means Asat. Sat is the stage where the name, form, etc. are present, that is the effect which comes from the cause, that is asat, which does not have name, form, etc. In other words, asat is pralaya state, the cause, and sat is a creation state, which is effect. So what is being said here? The Atma, which attained mukti, liberation, gets a spiritual form, has nothing to do with cause and effect, karana and karya, no sat, no asat, which happens during the pralaya and srishti. They are out of that program. Whereas the Baddhatma, the conditioned soul, they certainly go through this Sat stage and then Asat stage. Whereas Muktatma has neither Karana or Karya, cause nor effect. Now to summarize, Nāsad ucyate. The Atma cannot be designated as Sat, being, which means effect, Karya, or it cannot be Asat, cause or Karana, or non-being. And this is meant for the liberated Atma, Muktatma. Therefore, they have neither cause nor effect to go through the pralaya and srishti, because they are free of karma, hence they have no connection to the material nature, which means they are not going to get any body. Their knowledge, their consciousness are not restricted by karma, because they are free of karma. Therefore, Krishna says, Nāsad ucyate. With that, we can conclude this sloka number 13. Want to say a few words before we end today's session. Chapter 13 is certainly a difficult one, but has wealth of knowledge in it. It is certainly hard for the hearer as well as for the speaker. So, if something is not clear, it's always good to ask questions and clarify that, rather than carrying on with those doubts. In that way, we all grow together in Krishna consciousness. Some of these sessions for sure must be heard few times to grasp and to understand what is being said. And more importantly, we should have continuity in hearing from one sloka to another sloka to another sloka. So kindly give your valuable time to receive the wealth of knowledge that's been given by the most compassionate Father, Sri Krishna, and more than him, the great saints and sages, acharyas and gurus. If they have not written commentaries, we will have no clue what Krishna is trying to say. Let's take the fullest advantage of this opportunity and not just stop there, but also share this wealth of knowledge to others as well. Jñeyaṁ yattat pravakṣyāmi jñātvāmṛtam aśnute anādi mat-paraṁ brahma nāsad ucyate. Namaste. Hare Krishna.